How's it going, everybody? This is Doom Kid. Today I'm here to talk about 7 classic mods for Doom 2. The mods I'm featuring here are so zany and impressive, but I don't see people talking about them that much these days. Some of them are ugly, some of them are beautiful, and most of them are somewhere in between. But what's indisputable is the amount of love and effort that went into these dusty old creations. I'm not listing them in any particular order, so don't dismiss a mod based on its place in this list. These are all themed mods, based around certain shows or games, since they tend to be heavy on custom graphics and sometimes even feature behavioral changes. Since these are from the mid-90s, they're designed to be run in DOS. Some require weird and random things to be done during installation, so I'll show the process in depth so that everyone watching can enjoy these mods themselves. Mod number 1, A Fistful of Doom. A Fistful of Doom is a Western themed mod. The name is an obvious reference to the classic film A Fistful of Dollars, but despite that, it just seems to be a generally Western themed WOD. You've got your cowboys in bandanas, sheriffs, Mexican banditos wandering around, as well as these creepy zombie cowboys that just want to punch you to death. Health power-ups are bottles of booze and plates of chicken, which is just awesome. It kind of feels like a little nod to Wolfenstein 3D. It comes with 2 maps which show off all the cool new graphics. It's extremely impressive considering the WOD editing tools that were available at the time. There's so much detail. Wanted posters featuring Doom Guy's cigarette-smoking face, vultures on the fence, a bell tower and a bell that actually rings. This is all incredible stuff for a vanilla Doom mod from the old days. My favorite moment was when I walked into a saloon and one of the many cowboys inside instantly gunned me down, all while ragtime music came from a nearby piano. That's just awesome. I got a laugh out of that. For what it is, this mod really does bring the vibe of those old classic Western films into Doom. The attention to detail really sells the experience. The only thing that annoys me is the classic whistle sound from the good, the bad, and the ugly that plays every time a cowboy is shot dead. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a great reference, but can become a bit ear-rapey if you kill a lot of baddies at once. Overall though, this mod is awesome. I absolutely recommend it. Unlike some of the other mods coming up, installation is a total breeze for this one. I simply extracted all the contents of fistful3.zip to my clean Doom2 directory, then at the DOSBox window typed fistful. It took about 20 seconds to install, complete with a cool splash screen, and then it was ready to go. One final sad thing about this mod is that it can crash on map 02 with a visplane overflow. It's a shame and probably would have been irritating for players back then, but that doesn't have to take away from the experience for those of us who are playing it today, because I've got a link to an expanded version of the vanilla Doom2.exe called Doom2P in the description. Using this expanded exe avoids crashes like this. It also has the added bonus of letting you play most limit-removing WODs, such as No Rest for the Living or John Romero's Sigil. Mod number 2, Simpsons Doom2. This is probably the most popular mod on this list, although most people might know it by its slightly newer cousin designed for source ports and released in the year 2000. This is the older version from 1995 on which that mod is based. I actually prefer this older version. It doesn't bother with custom music and custom textures, it simply replaces sprites and sounds. The whole thing becomes a cacophony of Simpsons quotes when several enemies are on screen at the same time. The sprites were all clearly drawn in MS Paint, but the solid colors and lack of shading actually kind of contribute to a more authentic feel, since The Simpsons only uses basic colors and shading anyway. All the characters were captured really well, and a lot of them are here. I won't spoil every single one, but the Mastermind and Cyberdemon are replaced with Smithers and Mr. Burns, whose attack is chucking explosive globs of radioactive goo. This is peak Doom, folks. At the installation screen, the mod actually tells you a way to use the included dehacked patch, but I tried it to no avail. Something about removing the REM lines from one of the batch files. I assume it's meant to make it so that the characters only say the correct lines, but I couldn't get that aspect of the mod to work, so Mo, Chief Wiggum, and Abe Simpson will all say each other's lines at random. It doesn't matter much though. If anything, the wrong lines only add to the zany 90s mod feel. Other than that, installation for this was very simple. Just put all the contents into your Doom 2 folder and type install. No weird hoops to jump through or anything like that. It takes about 10 seconds to do what it needs to do, and then you're ready to jump in. I know I mentioned the newer version, but there's actually an even older version as well that's just for Doom 1, making 3 different Simpsons Doom mods in total. Jesus Christ, I guess people just couldn't get enough of that Simpsons Doom fix. It's not that surprising really though, considering how popular both Doom and The Simpsons were, and have been since the 90s. Mod number 3, Sub-Zero vs Lin Kuei. This is one of those mods that slipped past me in the old days. You play as Sub-Zero going around killing a bunch of Lin Kuei soldiers, who happen to look identical to Sub-Zero, and then there are also unmodified Doom imps with the same voice as Sub-Zero, as well as some hooded guys who show up later on. A lot of creativity clearly went into this one. When you start the game, you instantly hear a very good MIDI of the Mortal Kombat theme from the movie, which fits the mod well. All the flair in the first moment immediately makes it more tantalizing than the average WAD from this era. Despite having impressive sprite work, some of it is really cheesy. It makes sense that Sub-Zero would use his hands to freeze people just like he does in Mortal Kombat, but the fact that it just sits still and turns blue seems a little awkward. Some are a little more animated than others, but they're all a little bit stiff. Regardless, the sprite work looks really good for something this old. Speaking of the weapons, the chainsaw replacement makes the most fucking bizarre sound I've ever heard when you switch to it.
Fine. Fine.
What is that sound supposed to be? Boing? Pine? I can't really tell what he's saying, but it's very strange. The maps are acceptable for the most part, neither bad nor amazing, but entertaining enough to carry the experience. I did find one really weird bug though. There's a room where you're supposed to run past a crusher and nab the yellow key, then escape back into the main part of the map. However, if you step backwards once you hear the crusher, which is a natural Doom instinct, you'll be trapped with no way out. An ugly but workable fix would have been setting this line here to be like a door that could be opened. It would simply raise the crusher back up high enough for me to get through. The author obviously didn't foresee this. After all, the installation screen very clearly states this is only a demo, but sadly a more complete version was never released to my knowledge. The ending of the first level is weird but also cool. You press a switch revealing this beam of electricity, then you attack it and it actually bleeds. What the fuck? And explodes, and Sub-Zero talks.
Let's hope you succeed.
This opens a previously locked door and you escape. The next map has a cool church thing going on, complete with stained glass and the Mortal Kombat logo. I like the big open space and the stained glass, but after that the map becomes pretty bland. There's also this pretty cool hellish room where these rogue dudes who replace cacodemons ambush you. It's easy, but I still enjoyed it. Installation for this one has one annoying step that completely prevented me from playing this when I first discovered it, since I knew diddly dick about how batch files worked at that time. You extract all the contents to your Doom 2 directory like normal, but for installation and play to work properly, you need to edit fight.bat. Right click it and edit it with Notepad. You'll see the word echo, a period, and a line. Erase all that crap so it simply begins with Sub-Zero. Now save it and close. Once you've made that small tweak, you can install the mod by typing begin. Everything should work then as it's supposed to. Installation takes about 30 seconds. Mod number 4, South Park Doom. South Park Doom is basically a poor man's version of Simpsons Doom in terms of build quality, but it's still a cute and hilarious little mod. You play as Cartman, and the first enemies you face are armies of Stans and Kennys. You would think Kyle would be the shotgunner, especially since modifying the Stan sprite to look like Kyle would be very easy, but instead they're visitors. This surprised me years ago, but as you'll play, you'll find out what enemy Kyle actually replaces. It's clever and it made me laugh, but I'll leave it to you to find out who he replaces. This is the noisiest one yet. It is funny, and I'll admit it adds to the weird 90s charm, but it would be flat out annoying to play an entire campaign this way. Another thing I like about this one is how it unintentionally became a showcase for how different South Park used to be 21 years ago. I've been watching it since then, and I still watch it now, so playing this was a total nostalgic throwback in more ways than one. There's really not much more for me to say about this one. I admire the amount of work that went into it, and back as a kid, I thought this was excellent. This is another one of those mods with a very simple installation process. Extract it to your Doom2 directory and type install. It doesn't get much easier than that. Mod number 5. Star Wars Doom2. People have been making Star Wars themed WODs since the dawn of Doom modding. The earliest Star Wars themed mods I found were packs of MIDIs and sound effects, submitted to the id Games archive in May of 1994. Maps soon followed. It's said that seeing Star Wars Doom was ultimately what led John Carmack to releasing Doom's source code publicly, because he saw how far people were willing to go to modify Doom. Star Wars Doom is even said to, more or less, be the earliest alpha version of Dark Forces. LucasArts wanted to expand the concept into an entirely unique game, so they developed Dark Forces which, according to what I could find, heavily referenced Star Wars Doom, at least for a few map layouts. It's not exactly the talk of the town these days, but needless to say, the various incarnations of Star Wars Doom were certainly influential and left a permanent etching on Doom modding history. Actually, there's a lot of history about the Star Wars Doom mods themselves, so I might do a comprehensive video on them on their own at some point in the future. There are so many different portions of what became known as Star Wars Doom 2 floating around in separate pieces that it might make your head spin. Many months ago, when I was looking for some old Doom TCs, I checked out the Star Wars section on id Games and had no idea where to start, so I just downloaded everything, which is like 30 WODs. I very thoroughly checked them all, and after hours in front of Slade and DOSBox, I finally concluded that Star Wars Doom 2, released in 1997, was the definitive, ultimate incarnation of the original Star Wars Doom mod. The original version is called Stardoom, and it's for Doom 1, but it's actually quite different and certainly inferior in terms of graphics and map quality. The nicest looking assets are all present in Star Wars Doom 2. The sinfully ugly stuff is all removed, and even though they're dated, each map was made with care, unlike some of the rubbish that makes up Stardoom's maps. Since Dark Forces was already out at this point, many graphics are borrowed from there, and it's very beneficial. The extremely early sprites found in Stardoom were probably made before Dark Forces even existed, so it's a huge step up to see these professional quality sprites and helps you get immersed in the experience far easier. Star Wars Doom 2 has an 8-level campaign, which may seem short, but each map has teeth, and it takes a bit of time and exploration to complete them. They all accurately reflect locations in the Star Wars films. Going back to Stardoom for a moment, it has 21 levels, which seems much better at first, but most of them are total rubbish, and some are even repeated pointlessly. Star Wars Doom 2 cuts it down to the 4 excellent levels designed by Matt Falk in 1994, 2 of which are in Stardoom, and 5 further maps created by the compiler himself, Garrett Granger, who is also a talented mapper. To modern eyes, Star Wars Doom 2 might not seem like anything that special. You've seen nicer looking maps and flashier TCs before if you're a WOD addict, I'm sure. But if you try to go back in time to 1997, this was really hot shit. The tragedy is, at least as far as I'm concerned, so few people seem to know that Star Wars Doom 2 even exists. Most people play the slapdash Doom 1 version, Stardoom, from 1994, and they see that it turns into crap from the third map on, and leave never to return, assuming that Star Wars Doom 2 is just a lazy conversion of the exact same thing, when in reality it's so much more than that. I know that constructing 4 blueprint-accurate maps back in 1994 would have been very demanding work for Matt Falk, and compiling all the different various graphical and sound assets would have been an absolute hell for Garrett Granger back in 1997, with all the garbage WOD editing tools they had back then, not to mention the various bits of work done by unfortunate souls who went uncredited in the text document. This mod is challenging, weird, and fun. I hope some of you out there play it and enjoy it. I feel it will, at least in part, make the absolute migraines the authors went through back in the 90s worth the while. Even in being the best of the 90s Star Wars Doom mods, it still couldn't get installation down to a fine science. For some reason, extracting the zip contents to your Doom 2 directory isn't enough. You need to also unzip it to a directory called Star Wars inside your Doom 2 directory. That's right, the contents have to be extracted to 2 separate directories. Don't ask me why, I don't know. I think the mod looks for some resources in one folder and some in the other, but either way, extracting it to both is the solution. It took me about half an hour of fucking around just to figure that out, but afterwards all you have to do is type install and everything ought to work from there on out. I guess I just had to be one more person in the procession of people who had to deal with a severe headache to get this WOD out to the people. Mod number 6, Dragon Ball Z Doom. That's right, another toon-based mod, but this one is quite unlike the others in that the weapons and enemies actually behave differently from their original counterparts. Each weapon seems to transform the player into a different Dragon Ball character. The single barrel turns you into Tien doing a tri-beam, the plasma turns you into Piccolo doing a special beam cannon, the chain gun turns you into Android 18, and so on and so forth. The quality of the graphics is quite excellent. I have no hang-ups saying it's exponentially better than what's seen in the other Toon mods. The changes to behavior are very subtle, but the clean dehacked work really lends itself to the quality of this mod. Sadly, only a small selection of enemies are replaced. Zombie men and shotgunners are now hopping Cybermen and Cell Juniors. Cacodemons are now Frieza, and Lost Souls have been replaced with Babidi. The main characters are only represented through their weapons rather than the enemies. When I first played this mod as a kid, I was kinda disappointed that a full-sized Cell didn't replace one of the tougher baddies. It seems like an obvious choice for an enemy replacement. But in hindsight, I can tell there were already so many hours poured into this by Daimo that adding another full enemy replacement would have just been too much labor for one man. Even despite the small number of enemy modifications, this mod is still super impressive to me. There are some awesome explosion effects, and the Doom 1 version actually uses the extra frames from Doom 2 to add even more flashy effects on the weapons. The sounds used for the Cybermen and Cell Juniors are flat out annoying. But honestly, it doesn't detract too much from this mod. Dragon Ball Z Doom has an easy install just like the others. Extract the contents to your Doom 2 folder and type install, then after about 30 seconds, simply type play. Once you do that, you're ready to go. Mod number 7, Batman Doom. When it comes to mods of yesteryear, it simply does not get more extensive than this. Batman Doom is a full-length campaign with custom sprites, custom textures, new music, customized enemy behavior, and probably even more stuff I'm forgetting, honestly. I can't emphasize enough just how incredible this mod is. In addition to a roster of small-time goons, there are also 7 unique bosses, including Two-Face, Joker, Bane, and more. There are so many interesting uses of Doom's limitations. One character named Zeke throws a Molotov cocktail, which takes advantage of the Pain Elemental's death sequence. Instead of an enemy that emits lost souls upon death, everything has been reworked so that it's a projectile that emits flames instead. This is such creative use of an engine limitation, and there are so many examples of things like this throughout the mod. Unfortunately, this behavior was changed before the final version was released, and was only left intact for the Mac version. Recently, however, this behavior was finally re-implemented into the DOS version. I'll of course have a link to the patch alongside the main download link. There is a lot of room for praise with this mod. A simple explanation does not do it justice. You have to play it for yourself. Despite being arguably the most intensive mod of the last century, it still does have a number of quirks and oddities. For example, why the heck is Batman going around jerking everyone off with his punch attack? That's one example of an extremely silly design choice. Speaking of the fist, it was actually broken in the original DOS release, meaning people had to use the Boom source port at the time to play it. In vanilla, once you switched to the fist, you couldn't switch back, so this mod was essentially Boom only for the first few years, until Fraggle fixed it in 2006. Some of the other weapons are a little awkward, but less so. This one weapon here kinda looks like Batman is running around trying to grope people. There's this one extremely weird glitch whenever you pause the game and scroll through the menu. god, it makes these weird screeching and glitching sounds, and eventually, if you let it sit long enough, it'll play through every wave file present in the mod. It's not a big deal, but it's extraordinarily weird. I don't want to dwell on negatives too much though. When it comes to full-fledged TCs, this has always been right there near the top, and it could be argued that very few surpass it, even today, in terms of sheer magnitude and number of custom assets. Installation for this one has never been hard as such, but as mentioned earlier, to actually get it working under DOS, some patches are required. To avoid being a pain in the ass for you guys, the download I'm providing comes pre-patched so that it won't crash when you use the fist. Just extract the contents to your Doom2 directory and type vanilla. If you want to give the Zeke enemy his extra deadly Molotov attack, I've also provided a link for the other patch that you can apply yourself. Well, that just about wraps up this video on 7 impressive classic Doom mods. These totally deserve more playtime and recognition than they've been getting recently. Some were huge back in their heyday, but many of these impressive mods have simply been pushed to the back burner. This is my attempt to bring them to the light. I'll definitely be making more videos like this in future, so if you have any older mods to suggest, please do so. I'd also like to thank my patrons, which are listed on the screen now. You guys rock. If anyone else out there is feeling generous and would like to sign up to my Patreon, I've got a link in the description. All donations are very, very, very thoroughly appreciated. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.